My workouts have changed a lot in the last 7 or 8 years. They're not even recognizable. I'm not a workout guru. I suppose I create some decent biochemistry content surrounding workouts, but I'm not a biomechanics guy. I just do what works for me. But when I look back at the way that I was training even 7 or 8 years ago, I don't think it was bad, but I just think I've evolved a lot and I've really changed my approach. So here's what's changed for me. Number one, body composition is no longer my primary driver. And that has changed my workouts tremendously, but ironically, it's changed my body composition a lot. I focus on body composition through my nutrition and through my movement throughout the day, but I don't focus on body composition with my workouts. I notice that if I focus on body composition with my workouts, I neglect a lot of really important things. For example, I train for vanity, and that's not exactly the best way to train. It's not functional, it doesn't work. You end up with injuries, you end up with imbalances. I let my body composition just kind of take a back seat when it comes down to my hour of training. And I let body composition come into play through my diet and through staying lean by walking and things like that. Don't get me wrong, I think about it. And don't get me wrong, like I love a workout that also makes me look good, but it's not the driver of how I work out. It's not the driver of why I work out. I work out for performance and to feel good and let the rest fall into place. Number two, something that's really changed a lot, and I've probably evolved even in my content stance towards this. I'm not afraid to mix cardio and weights anymore. In fact, I used to kind of bag on people that would do that. I wouldn't say I'd bag on the people, but I would bag on the idea of it. Be like, hey, well, you're decreasing your effectiveness in one category because you're blending mediums, right? Like by doing some cardio and then going into a lift, you're not able to lift as much because you're somewhat exhausted. And that is somewhat true, but the literature is now starting to suggest that muscle hypertrophy, you're really splitting hairs. Like if you do a little bit of cardio, like by hitting a rower and then jumping and doing some bench press, you're not negating hypertrophy that much. I mean, if you're trying to squeak every little bit of muscle mass out, then yeah, the literature is stacked up a little bit more towards keeping them separate. But for me, I'd rather get in and get out and be time efficient, because that's gonna get me the best result, because otherwise I just won't have time. So I'd say now I'm just not afraid to do a CrossFit style workout as long as I don't do anything stupid and get hurt. I'm not afraid to run around the block and then do some shoulder press as long as I don't do anything stupid. Number three, I do some training fasted and I do some training in a fed, fueled state. And sometimes there's specifics to it, sometimes it's totally random. And the reason behind that is I used to think that fasting and doing your workouts in a fasted state was the only way to do it. Like, I wouldn't say I was dogmatic about it, but I really believed that that was the best. And as I've talked to more and more experts and true athletes and people that are really just dang good at things and better than me, I've noticed that it's like 50-50. I'm like, it's like some people just really do well fasted, some people really do well fed. I just happen to be one of the guys that does well fasted. But I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to be a one-trick pony. I want to train myself to also be able to work out fed. So what have I done is I've occasionally had some fruit or some kiwis or something before a workout. And then it kind of turned into this game where sometimes I train fasted, sometimes I train fed, and a lot of times my performance is about equal. There's no real difference, but at least I'm training different energy systems and I'm breaking those barriers in my mind. No matter whether I am fasted or not though, I still consume electrolytes. Some people would say that that breaks a fast because there's a couple calories in them, but I consider it fasted. So if I'm fasted, I'll usually have 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium between the time I wake up and the end of my workout. If I'm fed, I decrease that a little bit down to 500, and that's 500, 130. And the reason I say that is because I usually have a little bit more sodium and some glucose coming in from food, which would make it so that I would need less electrolytes during my workout. The electrolytes that I use, I popped a link for down below. They're called LMNT, and that has that perfect combination. It has 1,000 milligrams sodium, 200 potassium, 60 magnesium, which is why I use it. It's the perfect ratio that I like specifically for me. That way I can use a full packet if I'm fasted, I'll use a half packet if I'm not fasted, and then drink the other half a little bit later on throughout the course of the day. So that link gets you a free variety sample pack as well. So it gets you a free variety sample pack with any purchase. So it's drinklmnt.com/Thomas. Whether you are fasted or not, it's a super low or 0-calorie way to get some flavor and to kind of kill your appetite as well. So check them out. That link is down below in the top line of the description. Another thing that's different now is I'm doing much more longer duration cardio, longer hikes, longer rucks, longer runs. And it's helped my performance in the gym as well. So before I was like a pretty stereotypical type of cardio guy. I would still run, but I would like keep it to like 20 or 30 minute blocks. They would be post-workout. They were almost bodybuilder-esque in how I would do it. Now I'm like, no, I have days where I'll go for an hour and a half or 2 hour run. Like it just feels really good. And I feel like I'm getting more sustainability out of it as far as how it improves my VO2 max, how it improves my transitions in the gym and my recovery. I just feel like it works really well. It may or may not work for you, but I do think that longer duration cardio has its very, very solid place. Number 5, I'm doing way more sled work than I was 7 or 8 years ago. I think 7 or 8 years ago, if I used a push sled or a pull sled or anything like that, it would toast me. Like it would absolutely toast my entire cardiovascular system and my legs. Now, I'd say I'm doing it at least 3 or 4 times per week. I try to incorporate them into almost all of my workouts anyway, simply because it's so dang good for my postural alignment. It's so dang good for my posterior chain. I had Knees Over Toes guy on my channel, I don't know, about a year or so ago, and he really changed my way of thinking surrounding it, where it became a very integral part, especially if you're trying to run, if you're trying to play other sports and you want to become more versatile, or as he calls it, bulletproof. So yeah, it's not like the staple of my workout, but it is a huge piece of it. And once you start doing it, you'll never remember a time when you didn't do it. It just feels so foreign. And the number 6 thing that I've changed, I hardly ever used to do plyometric stuff. Like once in a blue moon would I do some box jumps. You would hardly never catch me jumping rope. Now I think about explosiveness. I'm not an athlete. Like I'm a guy that like trains hard recreationally and I run a lot and I do some extreme things, but I don't consider myself like an athlete per se, even though I guess on paper I kind of am. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't adopt some athletic principles. Like now that my son's getting to an age where he wants to play sports and he wants to run around, and I realize that I don't have that fluidity, that bounce, that spring that I used to have. I want to train to have that just because it makes me feel good inside. So nowadays my workouts do incorporate more box jumps. They do incorporate more pogo jumps where you just stand straight up and jump and use your calves. I do a lot more double unders. I do CrossFit type explosive moves because I want that power, because it feels really damn good. Number 7, I stopped neglecting deadlifts. Now here's the thing. Back in like, I don't know, I guess it was 2012 or so, I was pretty much like the middle of my weight loss or so. I injured my back pretty bad on a leg press machine. I ruptured L4, L5, L5S1, really bad leg press injury. And it's never been the same. Anyone that has a serious back injury knows that like it never fully comes back. And as a result, I really avoided deadlifts because the couple other times that I re-injured it, it was doing deadlifts. And it was always doing them going too heavy, right? But what I realized is that I was neglecting deadlifts because I occasionally got hurt with them, when in reality, I needed to go back to basics, go light, develop proper form, and sort of bulletproof my back. I have had probably 1/10 the amount of back flare-ups over the last like year or so since going heavy on my deadlifts and reincorporating proper form with them than I ever did before. So clearly I'm doing something right by not neglecting what I needed to strengthen. And the bottom line with this is not just isolated to me. Deadlifts are safer than squats. I will take a deadlift any day over a squat. It's a much more natural movement than loading my spine. So nowadays I do twice as many deadlifts as I do squats, and my body thanks me for it. Number 8 is I do a lot more BFR. 7 or 8 years ago, I would have thought that BFR, blood flow restriction training, was only for the total weirdo kind of D-bags in the gym that might like put those things where they cinch them up to try to make their muscles look bigger. That's not why I do it. Sure, you get the pump from high heaven, like it's awesome. But I do it because it's a way to induce hypertrophy with like 40% load or even less. So I use BFR on days when I'm tired, but I know that I should train. Maybe my recovery score on my Aura or my Whoop says that I'm recovered and I feel good, I'm just tired. that's a good day to throw those cuffs on, go a light load, but get a good taxation on the muscle and get that stimulus that you need for good hypertrophy, which can occur with BFR under a light load. And there's a lot of studies to back that up, as well as a pretty strong lactate response, which acts as a signaling device to potentially signal hypertrophy and anabolism in the first place. So BFR is pretty darn amazing stuff, but it's also just good to do when you're tired and you just need that leg up. And number 9, I focus on locomotion now. My movements are all dynamic. And some people don't like the guy, but I'm a big fan of David Weck. I think that even though he's a little bit loco, no pun intended with locomotion, he's got a lot of stuff that makes sense. And I know that there's the anti-rotation people that come up against him. The anti-rotation people are the people in the biomechanic world that think that we should fight rotation. We should be stiff, whereas David Weck believes we should be able to kind of be fluid and move and be safe and strong through all ranges of motion. He's the guy that created the Bosu ball. So you can see how like anti-rotation doesn't really align with Bosu, right? I guess my point in that, even though I don't use a Bosu ball, I apply a lot of his principles. When I lunge, I kind of move from side to side. When I run, I move from side to side. I have dynamic movements through my torso, and it's really helped make me stronger so that I feel like I can reach and move and have the locomotion and less stiffness, so I'm not walking around like a bodybuilder. But I continue to evolve. I don't know what I'm doing entirely with all this stuff. I just do what works for me, and I educate however I can. I'll see you tomorrow.